invite you to turn in your sermon notes or the Bible, whichever way helps you. I'm going to read a passage from Mark chapter 4. It's a story that you may have heard before. It's the story of Jesus calming the storm. Matthew has a version of this story. Luke has a version. I'm going to read Mark's version of this story. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Now, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. Now there were other boats with them. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Now Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Now he got up, rebuked the wind, said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Now he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." My friends, this is the Word of God. Now, this morning when after I told God that I was tired this morning, the next thing I did, I took my phone and I turned on the weather app. And I checked to see where Tropical Storm Ian was. Did anybody else do that this morning? I checked to see the intensity of this tropical storm. You see, I'm not a meteorologist. I don't know much about it, but I am absolutely fascinated by severe weather. I don't wish severe weather on anybody, but anytime there is a hurricane or a tropical system out in the Caribbean, or especially in the Gulf of Mexico, I pay attention. And I'll find myself checking my phone every few hours to get the latest update, especially when there's a day like today, when the headline on my weather app said that Tropical Storm Ian is expected to rapidly intensify. That gets my attention. You know, I'm fascinated by severe weather. I'm a weather nerd. But it's not just hurricanes, it's tornadoes and downbursts and any kind of severe weather. Now, I've been through hurricanes, and with the time I spent down on the coast, and I've never been through a tornado. I don't care to. I have no desire to be through a tornado, but I've learned that a few months ago, I'm not the only weather nerd out there, that when a storm came through this part of Livingston, you know the one I'm talking about, that knocked a hole in the roof over in the Fellowship Hall. You know that storm? The one that blew a giant sycamore tree down in the backyard of the parsonage down here and landed on Patty Zell's garage. They got that storm. You know, the day after that storm was, it reminded me of how it was down on the coast after a hurricane came through and there was a lot of damage. You know, Sumter County is not that much different than Baldwin or Mobile County, because after a storm, there's a lot of sightseers. There was a constant parade of cars and trucks coming through this part of Livingston, and almost everyone was taking pictures. Some of them, as they were pulling away, I was out cleaning up our yard and dragging limbs and stuff out to the street, and as I was doing that, some of them would tell me this: Steve, just let me know if you need any help. And I'm going, and as I'm watching them pull away, but obviously I probably have done the same thing in the past. A lot of us, we can be fascinated by storms, but one of the things that I've learned, even godly people go through storms. In the book of Job, for instance, Job, you may be familiar with his story. Job was the most godly man on the earth, on the planet, at that point in time, that he was so godly that every day he would offer sacrifices for his children just in case they had done something wrong. And Satan attacked Job, and he went through a storm. Job lost everything. He lost his family. The only part of his family he had left was an aging wife. And not only that, he lost all of his wealth. Everything evaporated just like that. And then Job had 3 friends, so to speak, really 4, and who were there to comfort him and encourage him. And Job, basically, their way of encouraging him went like this: hey, you are suffering because somehow you sin. Kind of thing we all need when we're going through a storm. But in Job chapter 40, verse 6, there's a fascinating verse. If you are like me and you underline or highlight things in the Bible, I would invite you to underline this one. But it says this: then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. What I want you to see is that sometimes it's in the storms that we hear God declares. Sometimes it's in the storms of life that we hear God declares. Now, storms can take on all kinds of forms. Of course, some storms are weather-related, but not all. When the doctor says that dreaded 6-letter word, cancer, no, that's a storm. Whether it's you or somebody that you love, that's a storm. When someone you love dies, whether it's a close friend or a family member, that's a storm. When the bottom drops out of the economy and you begin to wonder how in the world will your retirement last, as long as you need it to last, or will there even be a retirement? That's the storm. Or how about when the person you trusted betrayed that trust and you're left high and dry? Storms. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, a wonderful verse. One of those verses I would encourage you to memorize, and I would encourage you to put on an index card and tape it to your bathroom mirror and tape it to the dashboard in your car. But the Apostle Paul says this: and we know that in all things God works for the good of those 2 things. Those who love Him and those who are called according to His purpose. Friends, storms are inevitable for all of us. Some storms, there's a forecast track, and you can anticipate Others hit you totally out of the blue. But storms are inevitable. In fact, I firmly believe this. If you are not currently in a storm, you are either coming out of a storm or you are heading into one. Did you come to be encouraged like that? Doesn't that make you just jump up and down going, I love this thing called life? But that's how it is. Storms are inevitable. When Paul says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. You know what all things means? All things, including the storms. So just look at this logically with me. If storms are inevitable, and if God can cause good to come out of even the stormiest storm, don't waste your storm. You know how we waste our storm? When we spend more time trying to escape the storm than to learn from the storm. Let me say that again. When we spend more time trying to escape the storm than we do trying to learn from the storm, we are wasting the storm. Don't waste your storm. Storms are bad enough. Wasted storms are even worse. So, this morning I'm going to just give you a few thoughts about the storms. Number one, the severity of the storm is measured by impact, not by wind speed. Not by comparing your storm to somebody else's storm. One of the things that I hear over and over people saying, yeah, this isn't a good time, this isn't a real good season in my life, but everybody else, they have it so much worse. Well, maybe some, but your storm is still your storm. Right? The severity of a storm is not measured by wind speed or how it compares to somebody else. It's measured by impact. Let me give you an example. I've spent several years in the ministry living on the Gulf Coast. I've lived in Mobile County, Alabama, in South Mobile County, in Grand Bay. I've lived in Baldwin County and Robertsdale. I've lived in Pensacola over in Escambia County over in Florida. In each of these places, we experienced tropical systems while I was there. Some of them were tropical storms, others were hurricanes, some were major hurricanes. Some were like a Category 1 hurricane or a Category 2. But here's the thing. You know, one of the greatest or the most destructive storms that I experienced down there was a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. You know why? Because friends of mine suffered a direct hit from a tornado. The severity of a storm is determined by impact, not wind speed. not how it compares to somebody else's storm. Hurricane George made landfall in southeast Louisiana back in 1998 after causing extensive damage down in the Caribbean. At one time it was a Category 5 hurricane. But by the time it had gotten through the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, it had weakened considerably. It had it made landfall. I can't remember what category it was in southeast Louisiana, but it was a very compact storm. Coastal Alabama escaped the brunt of the storm. Everybody was talking about how fortunate we were, but don't tell that to my friend Gabriel. You see, there was one fatality in the state of Alabama, and it was Gabriel's mother who drowned. The intensity of a storm is measured by impact, not comparing that storm to another storm. It's measured by how it impacts you. So this is what I want to tell you. If you're going through a storm right now, it's your storm, regardless of how it measures up to somebody else. It's a real storm. Okay? It's truth number one. The second thing that I want you to see is that the best time to prepare for a storm is before the storm hits. Got an email yesterday from a guy named Chris Ackerman. He's our disaster relief coordinator in the Alabama West Florida Conference of the Methodist Church. And he was telling us that now is the time to prepare for the storm. If you wait until the storm is upon you, then it's too late. Now we know that about weather, don't we? But what about the spiritual storms? What about those storms that come into our life that aren't weather or aren't even health related, but maybe spiritually related? You see, you prepare for the storm when the weather is calm. So here's a word for all of us. If things are going, maybe not like perfectly smooth or whatever right now, but they're going pretty well in my life. You know, things are going pretty well. Now is the time to prepare for the storms to come. One of my mentors in the faith, I love this man. He has gone on to glory. He was from Andalusia, Alabama. He was a retired dentist. I called him Dr. Ed. His name was Ed King. And Dr. Ed was well into his 80s. And when I moved to Andalusia, it was my first year of full-time youth ministry. And Dr. Ed just poured his life into me. He would come in every Monday morning. He would pray for me. But he would also teach me. Not book learning, not teaching me. I'm talking teaching me life lessons. And the thing that Dr. Ed taught me was the value of memorizing Scripture. And Dr. Ed would spend so much time memorizing Scripture, not knowing of the storm that was going to come in his life. You see, while back, Dr. Ed was diagnosed with colon cancer. And it was extremely painful. He could no longer read his Bible. But he had a library in his mind of Scripture. That when the weather wait till the storm hits. It's too late. The third thing I want you to see is that there is a lesson in every storm. Every storm. Financial, relational, weather, health, family, every single storm. I want you to notice something. Look in your sermon notes and tell me, who initiated this trip, this boat trip into the Sea of Galilee? Who initiated it? I can't hear. Did anybody say Jesus? Yeah. Now get this. Jesus was God, right? And as God, Jesus knew what they were going into. Would you agree? Jesus intentionally took the disciples into the storm. Do you see that? Why? Because some lessons can only be learned in the storm. When the disciples woke him up as he was taking that nap in the storm, Jesus' first words to them was, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" You see, class was in session. Now, don't get the impression that this was some minor little storm. The Bible describes it as a furious squall. The Sea of Galilee that they were on sits about 650 feet below sea level. It's surrounded by hills, but between the hills there are little valleys. Now when wind is blowing across the land and it comes into contact with those hills, the wind becomes very concentrated and blowing through those valleys. And so furious storms can sometimes arise from out of nowhere. They're on the lake. And so when Jesus asks, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Class was in session. And the subject matter was not weather, it was faith. Are you in a storm? Are you afraid? Class is in session. Fourth thing I want you to see is that past experience does not ensure present success. Many of you, perhaps all of you, have emerged from previous storms in your life. Okay? You've emerged from it. You've come out well, and you are stronger because of those storms. That's true. But here's the thing. No matter how much experience you have, you will likely encounter a storm at some point that your experience is not enough. There in the boat with Jesus were fishermen who had grown up on this lake. They had fished these waters their whole life. They knew the danger of these storms coming through the valleys around the Sea of Galilee. They had likely experienced many storms before, but this one ate the lunch. They weren't prepared for this one because no matter how much experience you have, you need more than experience. You need Jesus in the boat with you. And I'd rather have Jesus in the boat with me than a lifetime of experience. Why? Because Jesus has seen every storm. And He's more powerful than any storm. The fifth thing that I want to give you is that storms reveal what is most important. Storms reveal what is most important. Has anybody ever read the book or seen the movie The Perfect Storm? Anybody ever seen it? It chronicles the story of the Andrea Gale. The Andrea Gale was a ship that was known for going out in the North Atlantic and fishing for swordfish. And does this ring a bell with anybody? And the Andrea Gale was caught off the New England coast in a terrible nor'easter. It was a storm where it was described as the perfect storm because weather systems collided in order to bring about an incredible storm. 6 crewmen on the Andrea Gale lost their lives. The ship was lost. And people who study such things, do you remember why? They say that the Andrea Gale and those 6 crew members could have been saved if the Andrea Gale and its skipper were not so focused on catching fish. You see, they had held on to the insignificant and they lost their lives because of it. Storms reveal what is most important. Don't waste your storm. You know, sometimes when I'm in the midst of a storm, I ask the wrong question. How can I get out of this storm? Anybody ever asked that? How much longer? Right? Will it get any better? Maybe we're asking the wrong questions. Maybe the question that we need to be asking, what are you trying to teach me through this storm? What are you trying to teach me through this storm? Remember, if you love God, if you are called according to His purpose, in all things God works for the good. Friends, I want you to know that when you are in a storm, class is in session. And the teacher is Jesus. The subject matter is not always what we think it is. The subject matter is faith. So, when you are facing a storm, are you willing to ask Jesus, mostly hymn or hymn of invitation. And it's found on page 513, Soldiers of Christ Arise. If you are facing a storm right now, you know the altar is open for you to come and say, Jesus, teach me. If you're facing calm weather right now, now's the time to prepare for the storms to come. Dr. Ed was a smart man. Will you stand and let's sing together? Go from here. Asking the right questions. Go from here. Preparing